Hello and welcome to The Hearing, our music show here on the John Scotto YouTube channel. I'm John.
I'm Scotto.
And joining us once again from MsJennyDreadful.com. Eventually, I'm going to get the hang of saying that.
You
Friend
are.
of the show, Jen Miller.
Ooh.
And before we get to this week's album, we've got some feedback. This was a comment left on our last episode, our review of Especially For You by the Smithereens. Smithereens fan said, "There's really nothing to review here. The album is perfect." Now, there are two issues. And it's great that you feel it's perfect. We disagree. I thought that some of Pat Denizio's vocals were mixed a bit low. You took issue with some of the effects on his vocals on Blood and Roses. But there's also another issue of if we do think something is perfect, if we don't have any criticisms,
it makes for a shitty show.
It makes for a weak show. We've been over that. But also, is it worth even reviewing?
I mean, I think it could be a perfect album if it was remixed, maybe.
Yeah. Well, not necessarily especially for you, but something, I think we've run into a few movies that we really had nothing bad to say about. This last one came close.
Yeah, it did.
But like something like Paris, Texas, we had nothing bad to say about that movie.
Right.
But I think it was worth talking about, if for nothing other reason than to spread the word.
Yeah. Definitely.
Something that's really great, you want to spread the word about it. At least for me, curation and recommendation is kind of a passion of mine. So, that's my, so even if it was a perfect album, I'd still want to talk about it. Anyway, on to this week's album, which is from 1988, Information Society by Information Society. Jen, you recommended this one to us.
Yes, I love Information Society. I think the lead singer, Kurt Harlan, is like my first crush.
Oh, okay. And speaking of, Information Society consisted at this time of Kurt Valaquin, aka Kurt Harlan, on vocals and sampler, Paul Robb on vocals, keyboards, and synthesizer. It's one of those two first names kind of deals.
Yeah.
James Cassidy on vocals, bass guitar, and keyboards, which I found very interesting, and Amanda Kramer on keyboards, vocals, and synthesizers. Amanda Kramer left the band shortly after the second single, Walking Away, was released. A little background, the band was formed at Macalester College in St. Paul, Minnesota in 1982.
And hold on, that is probably the most shocking fact that I learned doing this episode.
Which, the Macalester College part? Or the 1982 part?
That they weren't British or New Zealand or Australian.
They're American.
That they were fucking from Minnesota. I would not have, pegged that at all.
And their name is a reference to Ingsoc, the newspeak term for English socialism in 1984.
Of course.
Before this album, they released two independent albums, the Ingsoc EP in 1983 and Creatures of Influence in 1984 or 1985, sources vary. And this is often referred to, and in fact, on Spotify, it says it's the CD plus G. This was one of those experimental formats in the late 80s, early 90s when CD-ROMs were first becoming a thing, where they'd put graphics on the CD.
Oh, okay.
So there were graphics on the CD. If you put it in a CD-ROM, you'd see some pictures.
Have we lost Jen?
Oh, yes.
Well, it was just like her picture for a while.
Let me try the link again.
You could edit this all out, right?
We don't edit anymore, so this is live.
Live, baby. Yeah, but we're glad that the Smithereens fan, checked us out at least.
Absolutely. And thanks for watching.
And we're sorry that we're kind of we're used to not doing this where you can see us. So
right. And it's a damn good album. It's just not quite perfect to us. And you're back. Hello, Jen.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. I know. Okay. I just completely froze on me.
I don't know if you know this, Jen. None of this is edited. This is going up as live. So down for a bit. Anyway, on to the album itself.
It was totally smooth. No one noticed.
Yes. Track one, the lead-off single, the song I think everybody associates with Information Society.
Of course.
What's on Your Mind, a.k.a. Pure Energy.
And the one thing, after listening to this a couple times, first, this was one of those albums, and kids, just bear with me here. Back in the day when, you had to really like choose wisely of what CDs or
Right.
in this case cassettes, I think.
You didn't have Spotify or even piracy to get whatever music you wanted for free.
Right. Or you had to hang out with someone who actually listened to this, and I
Right.
didn't. So,
Uh-huh.
I mean, I was only familiar with the singles, but it was one of those bands of like, yeah, I wonder what the rest of the album sounds like. So it was
Yeah.
kind of like the first time, even though we've had this technology for how long, that I've sat down and listened to it.
And of course, this song and Walking Away are well known for some samples from Star Trek. And those samples were authorized for use on the album thanks to the efforts of Adam Nimoy, son of Leonard Nimoy, and a fan of the band.
But
And
the,
Pure Energy is Spock saying Pure Energy is really the hook of the song.
oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the thing I never really realized about this band that I really loved so much of it is her voice.
Yeah, Amanda Kramer.
Yeah, I mean his voice. I mean he's doing this Thompson Twins Duran Duran Bowie thing.
That's interesting. You call that out. Because not the entire album, but this song particularly.
Oh, definitely.
Well, to me, it sounds like Depeche Mode Light.
Well, there's a lot of Depeche Mode in the album, but there's a huge Thompson Twins.
I never thought
sort
about
of influence on this. I mean, the two of them doing the vocals like that are totally what the Thompson Twins were doing.
I went ahead and listened to some of their later albums as well, and
oh yeah,
it's more interesting when there is a woman in the band who he can harmonize with, because there were two other women who came in. I recommend we'll get to recommendations, but they had an interesting. They've had an interesting journey. I'll put it that way, from this album to their latest.
Well, you could tell there's a lot more they wanted to do, but I'm not sure if it was quite the record label that made them do what they did in the end, or you could see there was more that was trying to get out in this album.
Yeah.
And this and Walking Away are two songs that I still listen to very regularly. I love both of them.
Because the crazy thing is, contrasting to last episode where we were kind of blown away, wow, the Smithereens sound like they could have come out in the 90s and no one would blink an eye. This one, you're like, wait a minute, this is 88? This is like the end of the line for this sound, you know? We've already heard New Shoes and Sly Fox and all of these other synth pop bands, and this is kind of like the third pass, or fourth pass even, at that sound, if you count Bowie and Duran Duran even.
And you can even go back, if you go back to like Howard Jones, who really and who really kicked it off.
Good call, Howard Jones.
But the interesting thing about this band, and I think was a common theme with a lot of the better synth pop acts like Howard Jones and Human League, James Cassidy played a synth bass. Like it's a synthesizer, but he used a bass guitar run through a synthesizer to play it. And it gives it a feel that a computer can't do.
All right.
Because a musician, and Jen, you'll understand this, you've studied a bit of piano, a musician can play a header behind the beat. But, it's just on the leading edge or the trailing edge. And it just gives a certain groove. A computer can't do that. A computer plays right on the beat.
So is he playing a guitar, are you saying?
Well, I've seen a couple of live clips. One, he had an actual bass.
Yeah.
He's also has this double neck with it looks like a keyboard and a bass. And they performed this on Letterman. And he had a guitar, but run through a synthesizer to sound like a bass. But just having that technique, and just being able to play it at the right spot lent so much to this album. I've always wanted to do a rock band arrangement for this, just so I can play that bass line. And
Cool.
there's parts that sound like this distorted guitar. Like during the breakdown, there's this thing that sounds like distorted guitar chords.
Yeah. And the breakdowns are, without a doubt, the best part of the album. Any song they've done in this. That's where the music really gets interesting and separates themselves from what's come. Yeah, it keeps them from being the Creed of the 80s. Really.
There's an end sound in the breakdown that reminds me so much of People Are People.
Yes. There's a bit of Grandmaster Flash in there and Herbie Hancock.
Yeah. That's what that guitar like sound reminds me
Oh
of.
yeah,
They
yeah.
rock it. You're
right. So many people imitated Herbie in the 80s.
Yeah.
But my husband with trivia, he a lot of times he'll play that, and then people are like, "Oh God, I love Beverly Hills Cop," and
Oh.
And if you don't know who they are, if you don't remember them, they do kind of sound like a bunch of different people. You know, they could be Depeche, they could be Duran Duran, they could be a few different acts.
But they even had the Thompson twins look pretty much.
At this point,
hair and stuff, and
all the color, very colorful and
yeah.
I showed my daughter Anna the Pure Energy video yesterday, and she's like, "I feel overstimulated."
That was
us, man.
80s and early 90s, because those the bright colors and the cardboard cutouts. We were still doing that in the early 90s. There were some fantasy videos that did that too.
Right, it was the thing with the videos back then, where they were still just trying to figure out what to do. I mean, at this point, they'd at least moved beyond the just random stock images that they were using, that they were stringing together, like breaking glass and whatnot,
or just concert footage.
Yeah. No, I think they were still doing that even back then. They were still just doing the live show where they're on stage pretending to play a live show.
Right. Yeah.
Or just a footage from a concert. They were still doing that back then.
Yeah.
And I love the sound effect at the end. It's basically a snare, but they throw this effect on it that almost gives it this breaking glass effect.
Yes.
That just kind of pulls the air out of the song.
Yeah.
Just finalizes it. Right, on to track 2.
Yeah, it's good.
Yep. Called Tomorrow. This one feels very Howard Jones to me.
I thought they were even going more into the Thompson twins, Duran feel here.
It's very early 80s synth pop, although the vocals are a bit Gary Newman, who was another influence on Kurt Harlan.
Okay. And it's so strange that they would be going after this sound, because like I said, it's kind of dying out at this point. Mm-hmm. I mean, this is 88, where, I mean, their contemporaries were like Milli Vanilli and,
Mm-hmm. And I have to admit, I mean, as much as I love Pure Energy, this one was pleasant but forgettable.
Yeah,
it was an album track.
The first half of this album does have like a lot of Dead Zone to it, kind of.
Well, that's interesting that you say that. To be honest, I forgot this song by the time I got to track 4.
Yeah.
I completely forgot the melody. It does have a nice slow break after the second chorus, though.
Like, I mean, because I don't have a whole lot written on it, but so like we get to lay all your love on me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, okay, what's up?
Let's just move on. Dan, do you have anything to say about Tomorrow?
Oh, well, I was just going to say, like most of my notes revolve around not so much the technical aspect, but that I mean, and how I listened to music when I was a teenager, and that whether like what it made me feel, and that one of the things I liked, especially like rewatching the videos, was that it had this kind of like it's almost like dystopian cute, where it's like it's dystopian and it got some nihilism, or when there's sacker stuff going on, and like, but it's so cute. And it has kind of a hopeful,
that even after describes the music. Yeah,
that was what was strange about the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
You had, and it's kind of back now in the same way, where the music is so upbeat and cheerful and happy, but the lyrics thrown over it are so depressing and like we're all just so fucked. I think even more so now, honestly, the lyrics.
Yeah, and
a lot of bands.
In the case of Information Society, because Kurt Harlan had this deep, big voice, and he really liked minor key melodies.
Yeah,
and he went a little dark with the lyrics here and there. I think that was kind of their saving grace. That aside from their breakdowns with the weird sound effects, it was Harlan's sort of gothic tendencies with this very poppy music.
Right. Yeah. And the 80s, though, it felt just so tacked together, like this whole they're being very vague about what's wrong with things. You know, they're not being very specific. Like
Right.
this is the problem that we're facing, sort of thing. It's sort of like, I think what sums it all up would be Genesis and Land of Confusion. There's something wrong. Things aren't going right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to come out and tell you what it is we're talking about, though, because I don't want to get anybody mad, and we want to sell records still.
Although the video spelled it out.
Yes, Spitting Image spelled it out for them. But Puppets did it, so it's not like, hey,
exactly.
we didn't know about it. They
dystopian cute. I was like,
exactly.
Dystopian cute. That does nail it right on the head.
All right, on to track 3. Lay All Your Love on Me. I was very surprised this was an ABBA cover.
But the first time I'm listening to it, I'm like, okay, this is more like an After Tomorrow, something more Depeche Mode like. And then when I'm listening to it at work today, I'm like, this sounds like a fucking ABBA song. I'm like looking it up, I'm like, oh, all right.
That was another one that I really liked. And I don't generally like ABBA.
It is a better ABBA song, that's for sure.
I particularly like this springy synth sound in the beginning, and then in the verses they pull out a Hammond organ or an approximation of it. Last thing I expected to hear on this album was a Hammond organ.
It could have been a single, I think, if they did a little bit more musically behind the chorus. If they could have made the chorus pop a little bit more to it, they could have had a single with that.
Yeah, it kind of falls down a little in the chorus because it's just this open,
right? It's just an open thing. It's kind of like, okay, yeah, that's right. We're listening to this still.
But just before verse 2, there's this vocal synth patch, basically a voice sounding synth patch.
Yeah,
that sounds like Gregorian monks. It just comes out of nowhere. It's just like Gregorian sort of thing.
You listen to enough prog rock, that just kind of washes right over.
I guess.
Like, okay, yeah.
It kind of caught me off guard on this album. That leads into this poppy music again.
Of course, they listen to prog rock. These guys. I mean,
they had to. And then the solo happened.
It would have been weird if they didn't.
And the solo is this sound that I have described as an Alvin solo, because it sounds like the Chipmunks.
Oh.
It sounds like one of the Chipmunks, just with this, kind of sound that they used for the solo. I was just really
after listen to it again.
pleasantly surprised by this song and utterly shocked it was an ABBA song. Now, track 4, the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, this one I was not a fan of.
Repetition.
Oh,
this is the obligatory ballad.
Yeah, I was kind of like, they did a ballad.
Well, as I was listening to their later stuff, they've done other ballads, but they're much darker and more interesting with the sound effects. This is very much a pop ballad. There's no interesting sound effects. It's a very major key melody. Not exactly major key, but it's not as dark and intense as most of their stuff.
right.
It comes off as very Spandau Ballet.
The title aptly describes it.
Yeah.
Repetition. Yeah. There's
The one positive, because James Cassidy does use a real bass, it does have a nice groove because he does find that spot just ahead of the beat.
And then the bridge introduces those keyboards. That definitely, made it better. But then it went right into the end, sort of, and didn't go anywhere after that.
And at the end of my notes on this one, I just have "make it stop."
So our next one,
track 5, "Walking Away." Another one of my favorites that I listen to, like I'd say weekly. Again, more awesome Star Trek clips. This time from Bones and I think McCoy.
The whole album kicks off with the McCoy sound, but we haven't made it through yet.
That's true.
I think it's just a more serious version of Pure Energy.
Kind of. And they do have very similar vibes.
And I thought I think the single version was a better mix than this.
I don't remember the single version.
It didn't seem like it had the same pop that the single version does. There had to have been a different mix.
I do love the snare sound.
Because I also remember it had the single version had an actual ending and not a fade out.
Oh, okay.
That's how I knew.
Okay.
Like, there's
maybe that's the video version. Okay. Love the snare sound. Love the sort of horn stabs on the chorus. I mean, they're not real horns; they're synths. They're obviously synths, but they're functioning as a horn. And this also has a sort of another sort of like chordal guitar solo. Distorted guitars. And the panning single note solo is interesting. It's one note.
Okay.
Just played rhythmically. Shades of Eyes Wide Shut. That just pans left.
What?
And then just the single piano note in Eyes Wide Shut.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, okay. Now I can see that. Yeah.
It's one note played rhythmically that just pans left and then pans right. And it was just, I'd never noticed it. I think because I've watched the video mostly, and it's mono. Or I don't know why, but it just caught me this time that note is going back and forth. Very, whole lot of love, Jimmy Page. I just love that little gag. And there's kind of a Star Trek clip solo as well.
Right.
They're kind of just going back and forth between these samples.
I mean, they really just went to town with the Star Trek.
And just their breakdowns in general had really interesting sound effects. All right, on to track 6, Over the Sea. Oh, Jen, I keep forgetting. Jen, if you have anything
to say,
just
no, I'll say something. Yeah, but no.
Track 6, Over the Sea. This one was really interesting because it had a nice dramatic opening, and the melody and the music don't match because the melody and the lyrics are very dark and melancholy. Feel very Cure to me.
I mean, I have I'd listen to this one again. Like, it's the first non-single I would definitely go back to. They feel more. It's more in their comfort zone. It's a good Depeche Mode, Duran Duran blend. But I'm trying to think back to it now. like my notes aren't really like.
Yeah. It's a nice sad melody, sad lyric over this bouncy pop music. Feels very Cure to me for that reason.
Okay, yeah.
And there's some great orchestra stabs, some nice dramatic breakdown, and it has a drum solo. Like synth drums, of course, not real drums. Although they use a real percussionist live, so I'm wondering if someone actually played them in the studio. Kurt Harland is credited with playing samples, so I'm guessing he actually pushed the button. They weren't programmed in. But yeah, I just liked this sort of mismatch of the melody and the music. On to track 7. This one was particularly interesting to me.
My only note on this one is like this was the one that was almost sexy, Oh no, wait, no, I'm
that's the next one I know.
That's the next one I know. Sorry,
this one, my first note is my first note on this one. Every 90s pop hip hop song.
Okay, yeah.
Because it starts with these drums, even 80s, that could have been sampled from parents just don't understand, and a billion other late 80s, early 90s hip hop songs that had that same rhythm.
This is what brought back the band Sly Fox that I mentioned earlier.
I love Let's Go All the Way. Yeah. I need to hear more.
Yeah.
You need to find
that's what reminded me of.
Yeah, very much so. And I think it's a real bass. I mean, an actual bass guitar on the track. And again, we got a synthesizer doing a very impressive guitar impression. Like there's a guitar solo, effectively, but there's no guitar credit, so it had to be a synthesizer. And the lyrics sound like a rap song, but he's singing them in Kurt Harland style. I had to think of his name. And then it goes into this chorus that is remarkably 80s.
Yeah.
And I think I heard a James Brown sample. Oh,
well, that's the next one.
Well, the next one full of James Brown, but I think there's a James Brown sample on this one too.
I'm trying to remember if there was one on this.
There was just a one little yell that sounded like James Brown. And again, more interesting sound effects during the break. A sample solo again. These guys. We'll get to the instrumental thing. I would love to just hear a proper instrumental with just all sorts of weird sounds.
I was definitely hoping for that too.
We kind of got that later.
Yeah, but it's like a minute. It could have ran so much longer.
On to track 8, Something in the Air. This is the one that you.
I know. We kept trying to skip ahead.
Yeah, it does have that James Brown guitar.
It's probably one of my favorite tracks off the album, definitely. And the fact that they did they sampled Big Payback 4 years before En Vogue did.
That's what it is, Big Payback. And you're right, it is En Vogue. I knew that from another song.
I mean, holy fuck. Has anyone asked these guys like why they didn't put this out as a single and what they thought of when En Vogue, had their biggest hit with it?
Right.
We should have done that.
Holy fuck.
That's what it was reminding me of. I totally forgot Never Gonna Get It. How did I forget Never Gonna Get It?
Well, it wasn't you that was never going to get it. It was someone else.
Just to explain why I said that, a friend of ours in college, for some reason, hated the breakdown of that song.
Because they felt like they were singing it to him, that he was never going to get it.
So we just periodically, just to mess with him, would just bust out singing it to him.
Yeah. It made me appreciate En Vogue for
5 minutes.
Yeah.
Like the vocal effect on the vote, like the vocal effect. It just has this nice distant quality.
And the sound bites of Spock here were just
more
phenomenal.
Yeah,
they're probably even almost better than Pure Energy, I would say. The mind meld. I know what you know.
Yeah. Much darker.
And
speaking of dark, there's this demonic voice that comes in.
Oh yeah,
it might have just been Spock slowed down, but it just caught my attention. It's just one little line.
Oh yeah, there's so much going on here, and just when you think you couldn't like it anymore, when you think it couldn't get any better, they play "That's the Way I Like It" on a tuba.
Oh, it's the trumpet. Yeah,
it sounded like a tuba to me.
I think it was a little high for a tuba, but a brass instrument of some sort.
Yeah.
And it is directly, "That's the Way I Like It."
Just a few bars of it, But I swear it sounded like a tuba.
This is one I need to go back to and really get to know.
Yeah.
It could become one of my favorites.
Yeah, it definitely should have been a single.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's even better than Walking Away, honestly. Well, I think the problem they had was that Walking Away sounded too much like Pure Energy. And this would have separated themselves, from it.
Pure Energy was a huge hit, so they put out the song that sounds like it.
Yeah, but the problem when you do that is people think, well, you're just the band that does Pure Energy, and you become a one-hit wonder.
Which is why a lot of this album came as a big surprise to me.
But if you put out a second song like that and that becomes a hit too, damn,
right?
Yeah,
that's how you build a career.
And speaking of. You gonna say something, John?
No, I was just gonna say about hindsight. 2020.
Yeah. And on to something different. Really, the oddball out. Track 9, "Running."
We're not walking now. We're running.
This was originally released on Creatures of Influence, and unlike other singles in the catalog, "Running" does not feature Kurt Harlan on lead vocals. The song was written and recorded by short-lived band member Murat Konar, who left the band in '85 and would later become an integral part in developing both SoundEdit, a Mac-hosted editing application, and Adobe Flash applications.
All right.
So he left music to become a software developer.
So, I mean, there's two different halves of this song, two different sides. You've got the first half, which, yikes.
It does start with this nice sound, synth sound that I can best describe as squidgy. That was just kind of fun. But it is weird to not hear Kurt Harlan, and it's just really cliche.
That didn't bother me as much, but it was the same song as Walking, only now they're running.
Yeah, well, yeah, kind of.
I mean, it's kind of like we get it. You move, you go to places. Okay, can we?
I have that it's as forgettable as Tomorrow and almost as painful as Repetition.
But then
it's really long.
Yeah, and then the second half happens.
The second half happens. It's like, now I'm in.
Then they bring back the squidgy synth, and then there's this atonal synth solo that got really interesting, and these long samples, and they just had fun with their sound effects library.
Right, and that was beautiful.
This would have been one I probably would have appreciated more if I was Spy.
Yeah.
Like, this
as long as you skip the first half, just go to that second half. It would be a blast. This is almost Prague, the second half.
Oh yeah, it's what it's very close to, and it's an album that came out like in the same year, maybe a little later than this, maybe a little later in '88. But "Land of Rape and Honey" by Ministry.
Oh yeah.
It has that very same feel to it. Except they were very, like, oh, nice and gentle, and poppy and
They weren't
stuff.
Ministry.
Yeah.
Well, in fairness, Ministry wasn't Ministry at this point. In '88, were they?
Oh yeah. Well,
But Ministry. Okay, when did they
Rape
start?
and Honey.
Oh, that was the Rape and Honey. When did they start then?
I'm trying to remember which Sympathy was more the synth pop stuff.
Yeah, they did 2 albums before that, and I've heard it.
But then, like, Twitch and...
that was kind of borderline, but Rape and Honey is really where they found their sound.
Mind is a Terrible Thing to Taste came out even before this, so...
Okay, so Ministry was Ministry before this. All right.
Oh, yeah.
But just skip the first half of the song and listen to the sound effects.
So think about it. The same year that Ministry was doing that, they were, of course, using the movie sound clips too.
Mm-hmm.
Like Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, Full Metal Jacket and stuff. I mean, they were really some out there clips that they were using.
And on to track 10, probably the most interesting on the album.
I wish it were longer.
Make It Funky. This is just a nice bass and drum groove with, as I call it, the Stephen Hawking voice. It's not actually samples from Stephen Hawking. It's just, that...
It's voice, the voice doing James Brown lyrics.
Text-to-speech program, that's what I was trying to think.
Yeah.
James Brown lyrics.
Good God.
It is just a really nice change of pace on, for the album. It's just completely different from everything else. And I get the impression they were just trying to fill space with this one.
Ain't it funky now?
Because when you're working with analog, you have to... It's much easier to edit it if it fills a certain amount of time. I know Rush has written a couple of songs that were just put in to fill a certain amount of time on tape. So I get the impression that's what this was, which explains why it was so short.
But what they were doing to fill time is more interesting than what they were doing as songwriters, though, in a way.
I have to say, I strongly suspect that Repetition was the record company.
Definitely,
because I've listened to the other albums and they did other ballads. Because on my notes for that I have maybe ballads just aren't their thing, but they've done better ballads. But they've had more interesting sound effects and darker melodies. They just happen to be slow songs, but they felt like the better side of Information Society. Have to recommend their latest album, Really Quirky.
Oh, interesting.
Speaking of recommend, do we recommend this one? You do, obviously. Jen recommends it.
I mean, I don't think I would. I mean, there's a handful of songs you'd want to go back to. Pure Energy, Something in the Air, obviously, and Over the Sea. Apparently, I'll have to go back and listen to it. What I like about it.
I'm going to give it a soft recommendation. I think the good generally outweighs the bad. Skip Repetition. Skip the first half of Running. Maybe skip Tomorrow, but I think the rest of it is pretty solid.
Yeah, honestly, though, I'd skip most of the first side. I'd go with Pure Energy and then go all the way to Walking Away and listen to the rest of it from there.
Not even you'd skip the ABBA cover.
Yes.
Oh, wow. I love the ABBA cover.
I'd skip the ABBA cover.
All right. That's it for Information Society. Jen, we've done this will be twice now. Where can people find you online?
It's msjennydreadful.com. So msjennydreadful.com.
All right. And give this video a like if you liked it. Of course, subscribe if you haven't and you want to see more for us. And down in the description, in addition to Jen's links, you'll find the link to this album on Spotify. I should have mentioned that at the top of the show. You could listen along. I'm sure you know about Spotify already. As well as links for us, all of our social media, our voicemail, our email, and links to subscribe to the audio version of this show on RSS and iTunes. Yes, Zombie Takeout and The Hearing have an audio version as well.
And we're not just going to do 80s albums, by the way.
No.
That is just coincidence.
Well, if you go back to the test episode we did, Estrons, who don't even have an album out, there's that new.
True.
And next time, speaking of which, we will be revealing Flowbots Fight with Tools, a 90s album, actually a Thousands album.
Yes.
It was that 10 years ago.
And aughts.
Yeah, with a guest again. Until then, always remember, never forget, wherever you go in life, there you are.
There you are.